whenever you wish. If you see me look to the left, that would be, is that? Anyway, if you see me looking to the one side, then you know that that is me just looking at my text. Otherwise, I try and look at the screen. Okay, so welcome to those returning, and a big thanks to the newbies that are here joining tonight for the second presentation in the series of 6 presentations on loss, grief, and bereavement. Last time we looked at things that were said or things that were done after death by people, and we also looked at staying true to yourself. Now, while this presentation is not a one-size-fits-all discussion of loss, death, and bereavement, it is a place to start discussions on topics that are not discussed, little discussed, or hard to find information on for those of us who experience death or are desperate to find answers to death and what that means. Now, for those returning, you might have heard a little bit of what follows in my first presentation. And while I don't mean to be boring, I do need to let the newbies hear this information. Besides, hearing it twice is not a bad thing. My name is Catherine Weir, and I am a loss, grief, and bereavement counselor and run my own business called itjusthappens.ca. And I help people who need answers, who want someone to talk to, someone who has been there, done that, someone who has learned and trained skills to help the bereaved heal. After my initial presentation back in May, I thought about the interest that was shown with what I do and how I do it. And from there, I asked Mary Jean if she would be interested in more presentations, and she said yes. And so I developed a 6-part series on different topics to death and bereavement. These topics I have learned and experienced and through others, and they are my own experience that come in wanting to know the ins and outs of this whole process. Over the next 5 months, there will be 4 other presentations on the 3rd Wednesday of months, November of this year and January to March of next. Mary Jean will post this presentation and after on both your website, and I will post it on mine. The first presentation that was done last month, I haven't gotten around to getting it uploaded, partly because I'm a Luddite and technology and we're a little challenging. So tonight's presentation is taped, but the question and answer part isn't taped. And so just for you to know, I prefer no one to ask questions while I'm doing the presentations, but I will answer anything after in the question and answer period. In tonight's topic, I'm going to give you my thoughts, conclusions, perspectives, research findings, and practical experience on being a good support system for the bereaved. I know of no class, research, or published material on this topic, even though it is often discussed by the bereaved. And believe me when I say this is a big topic with the bereaved, because when you experience a loss and when you are lost and looking for help, bereaved support is just basically, what would I say? It's the thing that keeps you going. It's the air that keeps you going. Bereaved support system are plenty in their forms. For example, hospices, mental health services. In Ontario, we have Bereaved Parents of Ontario. I think it's Bereaved Families of Ontario. Maybe your doctor helps you find someone, a service. Then there are those who look towards religious supports. There are elder members of churches, therapy practitioners, and so on. But the one thing not one of these services do is spend time focusing and teaching how to be a good support system and how to recognize a good support person or service. So this presentation focuses on 3 topics: types of death, good and not good support systems, and tips for helping. But first, 3 things I want to note for everyone. One, the 6th presentation in this series takes place Wednesday, March 22nd, and at present remains open as to what the topic of the presentation will be. Mary Jean and I discussed leaving this topic of the presentation open to you, the audience. You can at any time suggest a topic for this presentation today or next time. And at the end of the January 25th presentation, I will announce what the majority of you are interested in. Please send your ideas at any time to Mary Jean or myself. Mary Jean will post my personal email and you can get a hold of me through my website. That is something we'll have to do tonight, post those 2 things. Second, at the end of this presentation, I'm offering a special discount for all the participants here tonight. That is one of the handouts that were uploaded. I would also like to note to the newbies here that I'm aware that this is an international forum, and the common bond that brings all participants together is the shared belief in spirituality and whatever method of comfort and discovery this means for you. I do not identify or follow any religious belief, but am highly spiritual. My beliefs are made up of Buddhism, indigenous religions, and Wiccan. I believe in past lives, future incarnations, shared energies, deep connections between nature and living, and that the core of healing, love, and growth comes from the center of one's being. Okay, so now let's begin on the topic of types of death. But before I get into the types of death as defined by me, I would like to say why I think it is important to understand where the death and loss you are experiencing fits in. You see, when Mikkel, that's my son, died, it was crazy because no one, including the medical professions, knew at the time why he died. It was Mikkel goes to school on Monday morning healthy. Tuesday, he stays home not feeling well. I take his older brother to the doctor because he appeared more unwell than Mikkel. On Tuesday night, I slept with Mikkel on the Chesterfield because I wanted to stay with him, be by his side. At 4 a.m., I gave him Tylenol. I laid back down, and with a few hours, I realized he wasn't breathing. I enabled the 911 system, started CPR, yelled at the person I was with to get the car. I did CPR on Mikkel standing, on the trunk of the car, sitting in the car. Luckily, the hospital was about 10 houses down the street. I carried Mikkel, yelling, "He is not breathing," into the ER. As many knew me there because of my paramedicine training, they rushed at me and got Mikkel on a gurney and hooked up. And that is how my journey into the unknown began. As the days progressed, no one knew what happened, including the medical professions. They considered everything, but nothing fit. It took almost 6 months for us to find out that Mikkel died of strep A. And then there was only one other child that year that died in Canada of the same thing. One of the questions I kept asking was, how do I explain his death? If not to anyone else, but to myself. And so my journey of the different types of death and their corresponding bereaved styles, if I dare call it that, began. What I realized for my son was that it was a sudden, unexplained death. And now, even though I know he died, what he died from, the research on strep A and it going invasive is still ongoing. So from this research and honing it down to what I see makes sense, I worked out death this way. Knowing the whys of death and loss helps the bereaved to understand what's happening around them. I'll say that again. Knowing the whys of death and loss helps the bereaved to understand what is happening around them. Okay, so now let's look at death as defined by me. First, there is sudden death. This includes the explained, such as an accident or a natural disaster. There is a lot of trauma in these deaths because they are instantaneous. And while they can be basically explained, there is still a high sense of confusion as to why this happened. Sudden death also includes unexplained. This includes any death where medical reasons are at a loss or medical professionals are at a loss as to why it happened. or there is no explanation to what happened. Homicides and suicides are included here. Second is anticipatory death. Anticipatory usually deals with someone having a lifelong illness or a disease with the outcome of early death. It is usually a loved one or someone you value that is in the process of dying, short or long term, that causes bereavement to start early. But as I have come to know, this type of death brings no less hurt, even though the bereaved have time to prepare. Third is natural death. This is the one that we all want to happen to us and everyone we love. We want to grow as old as possible and die because our body has worn out after years of life and living to the fullest. It's a fantasy because even when someone we love dies a natural death, bereavement still is a lifelong healing process. After all, we only experience bereavement because we have loved with all our hearts and souls. I'll say that again. We only experience bereavement because we have loved with all our hearts and souls. Finally, and this might raise some eyebrows, I suggest the loss of self, your identity, as in yourself, of who you are, and your career, your home, can also be experienced as a death. This last one is one I learned about at Mikkel's funeral. When my rock, the person I mentioned before in my last presentation, stood with me beside my son in his casket, I said to him, you know, the greatest loss anyone can have is the loss of a child. And he said, no, Catherine, the greatest loss anyone can have is the loss of self. Because without knowing yourself, you could have never loved Mikkel as much as you did. I'll say that again. The greatest love anyone can have is the loss of self, because without loving yourself, you could have never loved Mikkel as much as you did. Now, it took me a long, long time to wrap my head around this one. And when I figured it out, I realized there are too many people out there walking around who do not love who they are, and as such, have tremendous anger, frustration, sadness, and other negative emotions swirling around them, which would make them have a hard time to accept and heal from their loved one's death. And I have seen this and experienced this with many people in both my paramedicine training and in working at hospice. On the topic of good and not good supports, we're on the second part of the presentation. A few weeks ago, and I uploaded a paper, the Mr. Church one. That's the one you might want to look at if you have access to it there. Okay, a few weeks ago, I watched a movie on Prime called Mr. Church. Eddie Murphy stars in it. Has anyone seen it? I'm not looking at all your faces, so if you've seen it, awesome. The movie stars Eddie Murphy, and you would think the story would be goofy, if not a laugh, because it's got Eddie Murphy. But Murphy appears to pull out everything his audience and fans never knew he had, and performed in a serious drama that knocked my socks off. And the reviews were outstanding. This movie, starring Eddie Murphy as Mr. Church and Britt Robertson as Charlotte, or she's known in the movie Charlie, is about a young mother who is dying, and her mobster boyfriend sends Mr. Church to be her cook and look after her and her daughter. Her daughter Charlie. I will not spoil the plot line for you because I recommend this movie to everyone, bereaved or not. There are two incidents in the movie where Charlie is at a funeral, and she talks about the people who come to the funeral and show up after a person has died. She says, and this is what Charlie says, people act strange around death. There are those who talk about everything but the person who died. There are those that talk only about the person who died. There are those who try to cheer you up, and those who can't help but make you cry. And then there are those who say nothing at all because they don't have to. Now, when I heard her say this, I thought, this is it. This describes the good and not so good supporters of the bereaved. Now, let me break it down for you. And remember, this is my perception based on my life's research and experiences. So let's look at the first two. People act strange around death. And number two, there are those who talk about everything but the person who died. I would call these the not so good supports. They are extremely uncomfortable with the mere mention of death. And while they want to be supportive, and I use that term loosely, they can't because they themselves do not or cannot. And because of personal experiences or of beliefs, and therefore they can't help you. They are there because they believe they have an external duty, societal, familial, cultural responsibility to do so. While they think they are there to help you, they are really not there for that. Say thanks to for their visit and let them go their way thinking they did a good deed. Be nice. Next is the third one, the middle one. Those who only talk about the person who died. Much like the first group I described, these people also have problems with being around the bereaved. But unlike the first group, believe they have a special connection to the deceased and as such, want to create or show a bond to the bereaved. In their own loss of the deceased, they are trying to create a link, a bond, to something they see as lost and they will not get back. I'll describe it using a death that happened in the last year in my life. A professor friend of mine who made a major impact on my life died suddenly. It was an unexplained sudden death and a shock to her family, academia, her students worldwide, her followers, the literary world, First Nations, Métis, Indigenous peoples worldwide, and yes, to little old me. I mention her on my website. Her name is Lee Miracle. When Lee died, I felt complete disconnect from the world that she was key to. Yes, I am connected through other links, but to me, Lee was the most important link to the world that I value as much as every breath I take. Even though our mentor-student time was some decades ago, knowing she was there was a comfort. After a death, I was at a loss, yes, me, of what to say to her children. And yes, I look back and I did exactly what Charlie talks about when she says, those who only talk about the person who died. Now, luckily, I got myself out of this hole very fast, knowing that this is not the type of bereaved support person I want to be, but also knowing that this taught me how easy it is to fall into this category when we receive the shock of loss. Well, this is not the best support person in this behavior. These types of support people might surprise you and be the ones that turn up when everyone else stops coming around. Sadly, for most, they only last a few days or a few weeks after the deceased's demise. Now, the last group I want to talk about are the 4s and 5s. The 4s are, and those who can't help but make you cry. And 5 is, and then there are those who say nothing at all because they don't have to. These are what I call the good support system. The ones who are not afraid to make you cry, to make you laugh, swear, scream, run, jump, kick, be enraged, but most of all, help you learn how to be bereaved. And while number 4s are amazing and might turn out to be the best support system you need or want, it is the number 5s that change your life for the better. They are the Bruces and the Anns of the world. They leave themselves at the door and become a warm blanket you put on or take off when you want. They are no, and I mean no, there are no, and I mean no exceptions. They expect nothing in return. Whatever you do, they will be there. They say little unless you need to hear them, or if you might harm yourself. They have good communication skills. They know how to listen, how to put others' needs before their own, without sacrificing their own mental, physical, spiritual well-being. They are the angels walking among us. They are the true heroes of the world. At least that is what I believe. In closing this section of the presentation, I want you to understand that these people do not show up for the funeral, just for the funeral. They're there. They might show up anytime, any place. And when you find them, you think the heavens opened and sent you another angel because you needed it then and there. I had two angels I called on immediately when Mikhail died. Even before they gave up all medical measures and pronounced him dead, I already had Bruce at my side and Anne on the way. And thanks to them, I survived and I did well. As the years went on, I only found answers to my grief through my own self-discovery and through reading and researching everything I could find. I ate words that barely equal to all the stars and all the universes of all times, but still I needed and always wanted more. And then I found Hospice Wellington. I found an art therapist who shone on me, art to heal my soul, and new angels entered my life. I trust these newfound women, and yes, they were all women. And while some of us are in frequent contact and others not, I would, upon meeting any one of them, feel complete and utter comfort in being me. After all, I am Catherine and I am bereaved. And yes, I still think there are more angels out there for me to touch and for them to further my journey. They will be my number fives. They are always those who say nothing at all because they have nothing, who say nothing at all because they don't have to. Now, to the third part of the presentations on tips for helping. So when I was putting together this section, I was confused about how I wanted to go about it. How do I tell you what to look for in a good support person? Or more importantly, how can you be a good support system? And then, like most thoughts, I woke up after I slapped myself out of my dense land and thought, tell them what you did not like and what you did like. Tell me what you needed and tell them what you need and still need. Tell them why knowing this stuff is important. Why is it important? Well, if you haven't experienced the death of someone close to you, person, pet, or self, then guess what? Know that no one gets away not losing someone. It is life, it is death. When my son died, I had no idea what the best support person for me was. I found out fast. Again, I go back to the people you have to say nothing to, but have certain traits that make them the best. And more than that, there are great short-term support people, specific task support people, and long life support people. First, let's look at the people who are good for the short term. These can be any of Charlie's 5 types of supports. They are the ones who take your kids to the park or overnight when you can't function. They are the ones that bring you meals, give you money, clean your house, show up when you need something done. These people don't necessarily have to support your emotional or spiritual needs, but they help with your physical survival, and with other members of your family, such as a spouse, children, or parents. Those closest to the deceased who are finding their short memory shot, and the basics, such as getting a glass of water, a major chore. These people usually only last a short time, most weeks, some a year, some for a year, some even longer. Sadly, society and people's beliefs mean that they think your mourning should, and I consciously say should, end at 3 months, at least that's what I was told, or a year, because there's this old adage that the first year is the worst. And it implies that after all goes back to whatever normal was, that after that year, all goes back to whatever was normal before the person died. And there is no normal after that. It's just an ongoing changing life. Let's see here. Okay, I've lost my place. And that is why I call these the short-term need support system. Take what you can get from these people, because believe me, you're going to need them. Just protect yourself by keeping the heavy stuff for those that are the number 4s and 5s. Second, the next group consists of people that are there at a time. You need them. These can be angels, but they don't have to be. They can also do the looking after of kids and family members. For me, I was immensely lucky to have 2 families that took on my other 2 children. One family took my older son and made him a buddy. He went to school with their son, so they were friends, and this family took Rowan everywhere. I can honestly say I have no idea where they went or what they did, because I was gone. I was not even conscious. But I did know they were heaven sent. They looked after my son and spoiled him rotten. When he wasn't with me or his dad, he was with them. The same thing happened to my daughter. A family of a school friend took my daughter under their wing. There is much irony in this story, because the mother was the one who wanted my daughter, and they spoiled her rotten. Both girls had a blast. Then in less than 5 months later, the mother dies. And this made the girls closer than ever. The father kept up the support for my daughter, and I kept up the support for his. These are angel experience you need, so cash in on these. I had other short-term support systems that helped me out. I volunteered at Aberfoyle School for years in trying to deal with my loss. The principal and most of the teachers let me help them in ways that others were not permitted. It became my second home. Other short-term supports that I can say helped immensely were Hospice Wellington, art therapy, meeting others like me in group workshops, and my paramedicine training. The last group I want to mention are the long-term support systems. These are the ones that are the angels, the Bruces, Anns, Marks, Marys, Marians, Lees, and many others. These are the people that have come into my life and don't need to talk, but do. Don't need to do anything, but they do, because they have an innate and learned capacity to know what to do for the most vulnerable. When you meet these people, keep them. So I'm going to list 4 traits of a good support system. So if you want to be a good support system for someone who is bereaved, there are 4 traits. Well, I say 4 traits. There might be many more that you must have. First, you must be able to leave you and yourself at the door. Second, you must listen with compassion and understanding, and keep your mouth shut until you know when to talk or the bereaved person asks you to talk, because their story needs to be told, and it needs to be told hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. You must always recognize the deceased. For example, those who know me know Mikkel is in my life each and every day. He is not an ignored topic. He is not an if-only topic. He is Mikkel. He existed, he exists, and he lives in those who love him. In my family, Mikkel is honored once a year. He is remembered in family talks, discussed when talking about the family, and my grandchildren know him well. As my grandson said last March 10th, I know, Grandma, Mikkel is the heart of our whole family. The last trait, you must be available. More than you would like at certain times, and at others, times you might lose touch, but you'll always be there, and others will, and you keep them in your life forever. They're the people that you meet months later, years later, the next day, and it's like the conversation never stopped. Earlier, I mentioned a friend that died last year, Lee Miracle. My heart still hurts when I say her name. I miss her in ways I never knew I would. But more than that, I miss this highly intelligent, funny, kick-ass woman who would have, and what she would have done next, because she impacted so many lives all over the world. You see, Lee taught me something that I hear in my head every day, and that's no exaggeration. When I was doing my master's, I was taking a class with Lee. I talked to Lee about the idea of how can the colonial cultures reach a place of understanding indigenous cultures and knowledge. And while much of that cannot be attained, and that's a topic for another day, what she said to me has been to this day one of the top 5 learnings of my life. She had recently lost her sister. She was bereaved. She is First Nations and Métis. She knew much about loss of self and identity. She knew much about the loss of Mikkel because I had told her, and she knew quite a bit about me. Here is why Lee changed my life and me forever. She told me to go to that place of hurt, that deep place where I feel pain in the loss of Mikkel. She said, this is where we will meet. Say that again. She told me to go to that place of hurt, that deep place where I feel the pain of loss of Mikkel. She said, this is where we will meet. And I have met her and many others since the day she told me about that space of hurt. And it is there that we truly connect and forever stay connected to each other. This is the support person you want to be. This is the support person you need when you experience loss. Loss of the loved one, loss of a fur kid, loss of self, loss of identity, and whatever creates that identity in you. Okay, so that's the end of the core presentation. And I'm just going to conclude with some thoughts here, and then we will have our question and answer. Well, this concludes all of the words that I have for this talk. And although worry not, I'm never out of words for chatting in the Q&A. I thank each and every one of you for showing up tonight. I thank you for listening, because this was a long talk with tons of information in it. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, I understand. Following this presentation, there's a Q&A section that I invite you to stay for. If you don't have to participate, but know that I'm always surprised by the number of you that ask the scary questions and the ones that open their chests and let us in to see the pain that resides within. And for those of you who wish to close out now, please feel free to contact me through my business or through my personal email, which will be uploaded. I always answer, and if you need counseling or want more help, then I'm here. The next presentation is on November 24th, and it's the holidays and bereavement. And while it might not be all that jolly, I guarantee that it'll be filled with coping strategies and how to make it through the now hated season of many bereaved, and things to know over time that the season just keeps on, as it just keeps on coming back. I invite you to return and bring friends and those who would benefit from this information. Don't forget that this presentation will be posted on Awakening Spirituality, and on my website, It Just Happens. And I will get the first presentation uploaded soon. As I mentioned, I'm a Luddite, so I have to work at that. Also, if you have an idea for the topic of the 6th presentation, please send it in. And before I forget, last time there were some really good posts that were awesome. I would like to use these posts to put on my website, but if you don't want me to, please let me know. For your information, I only use the comment section and just your initials. I don't use anything else, but I won't use them if you don't want me to. And finally, the other paper that I gave to hand out is a promotion. And so for anyone participating tonight, I'm offering a promotional 20% off until tomorrow at 10 p.m. The information is in that flyer, and feel free to do that if you want. It doesn't expire until December, end of December. Now I'm done. And so let's get to the Q&A so we can end this recording and move on to the next section.